Red Smith, as a favor, drove down from New York. Eddie Collins Jr. was the baseball coach at Episcopal Academy in 1970. And Red Smith being a hero of mine, so much of a hero that my dear mother cut out his articles for the 2 years that I was in West Africa in the Peace Corps and mailed them to me. And I still have the now yellow clippings. So I go to the sports editor of the Manly Times. I was the general science reporter, and said, he's a hero of mine. Can I go cover the Episcopal speaking there? She said, sure, go. I go there. The kids are talking to Red, listening to Red Smith, gracious as always, and eloquent. And then they start leaving to go to class, and Red stays there until the last two 14-year-old kids are asking him questions. This is a syndicated columnist. And it was very impressive to me. So I'm going to stay here like Red Smith. Any question you have. And from that incident, I introduced myself to Red Smith and told him he was a great hero of mine, got me interested in journalism. And he ended up inviting me to lunch, or I ended up having lunch with him. I went to the old Marriott on City Line, and he's finishing a column on a computer fight. A computerized fight had Rocky Marciano and Muhammad Ali fought. So I'm in the room, he says, I'm in room 411, whatever. I'm floating. And he finishes the column, which hundreds of thousands, millions of people are going to be reading. And that year he was syndicated with the New York Times. Then we have lunch, and we're talking like I'm talking to you all and do about sports. And he says, well, it's great to meet you. I'm driving back to New York. And I say, would you like company? And he says, sure. So I'm in Red Smith's car. We drive to New York. He takes me to Penn Station. I get off and go back to Philly where I live. I wrote a story about that. And that story led me, among other things, to get a job at the Arizona Republic. Their editor, Bob Early, was a Notre Dame grad, as was Red Smith. So I will be here as long as you want to talk about Wilt or anything else. Let me read briefly from the prologue to my book, which gives it, I think, a nice overview of Wilt. And I've been to lectures of authors, and they'll just read from the book. I always think it's lazy of them, a cheap way out instead of thinking about what they want to say. But I'd like to read this prologue. He was blessed with devoted friends, adoring fans, and loving siblings. He was famous for almost 50 years, a millionaire many times over, and the lover of countless women. Yet Wilt Chamberlain died alone in his oversized bed. He outshone without trying most other sports stars and celebrities. He dominated every venue with his magnetic personality and presence. He intimidated by his size and persona. Even among fellow athletes, his strength and athleticism are legendary. He moved 6'8", 250-pound men like cups of coffee. Wayne Embry, thinking of him, the way he could move them. His appetites were also the stuff of legend. He consumed enormous quantities of food and drink. Gargantuan, too, was his sex drive. He had insomnia for most of his adult life, but functioned well on little sleep. He often drove cross-country without stopping or sleeping. He always carried between $5,000 and $10,000 in cash. And he said, who's going to rob me? He would ask. He was a sharp businessman and negotiator, yet easy to take advantage of in matters he didn't care about. So he was told he didn't realize that his MBA pension was $1 million. I know that from the executor of his will and dear friend Cy Goldberg's lawyer and buddy in LA told me that. He was charming, funny, loquacious, loyal, giving. He was also moody and obnoxious, a real pain in the rear end at times, according to his closest friends, fondly recalling his idiosyncrasies and overwhelming personality. Friends like to imitate his unforgettable deep voice when he would begin a thought with, my man. I can't see the documentary. They artificial intelligence to recreate Wilt's voice. He was a contrarian who rarely admitted to being wrong. The best his friends got was, "You may be right." It was not easy being his friend, for he rarely returned phone calls, and he demanded the relationship on his terms. Yet in 1984, he flew from Los Angeles to Philly and back in the same day to reprove the second wife of his doctor, Stan Lorber. Really, Stan was going to marry him, of course, whether Wilt approved or not, but it says something about it. And when Stan's first wife died, Wilt said, "Let's go." And he was down in the dumps. Wilt said, "Let's go to Italy, all expenses on me." And they went to Florence. And Stan Lorber, one of my favorite, among many favorite interviews, told me that Wilt, when he saw Michelangelo's David, was awestruck, and Stan was thinking, Wilt finally found someone who's better built than he was. And a great anecdote from that. I love to tell Wilt anecdotes because I think they reveal a person, as well as the nuts and bolts of playing the Celtics in this NBA season and that season. Wilt would run 5 miles every day, almost of his life, post-retirement Wilt. And he comes back after running 5 miles, and they're in this little nice hotel, I'm sure, in Italy, and they order breakfast. Wilt gets bacon and eggs, and says, "I want some orange juice." And they bring these little 4-ounce glasses of orange juice, as they then served in Italy, or maybe still do. My dear friend Ron was there last month in Italy. And Wilt says, "No, bring me some more." And they bring him a few more glasses with 4 ounces. And Wilt says, "Bring me every glass you have." And they bring 36 glasses, 144 ounces. And Wilt just drinks it with his breakfast, and the waiters are, and their jaws are lifted. Wilt had that effect on people, and I love to hear stories about his, as you all know, his incredible strength and stamina. He relished having friends over for dinner, usually steak or turkey, always prepared by him. He was an excellent cook, as friends recall. Despite his wealth, there were no servants. He washed the dishes by hand. His sister Barbara was one of the few people he allowed in the kitchen. It took me 2 years, but I interviewed Wilt's sister Barbara, his closest friend, confidant, and a dear friend who just passed away a couple of months ago and would be here, but for that or the stroke that did him. And Jimmy Sadler played with Wilt at Overbrook. Through Jimmy, he gave the good word to Barbara that I was okay and would not screw his brother. Barbara comes to my house with Jimmy. We get delicatessen from Heine's. We have nice lunch. Afterwards, she wouldn't let me in the kitchen. She said, "I'll wash the dishes," like my mother taught me. And it says something about the Chamberlains, about the parents, Olivia and Wilt, the father and mother. As the same thing with Wilt, he didn't have servants. The people worked for him, and I'm sure he drove them up the wall, and they were always changing. Wilt knew a smattering of words in a dozen languages. He first learned to appreciate different cultures when, as a young man, he traveled through Europe with the Harlem Globetrotters. Far and away the greatest basketball experience and the most fun of Wilt's life. And one of the chapters I begin in the book with Wilt saying that the Globetrotters were everyone's hero in his neighborhood, Black West Philadelphia, growing up. Wilt wasn't developing in college, getting a little out of order, but that's the way I operate. He was in Kansas, and the teams, there wasn't a 24-second clock. They were holding the ball and beating the hell out of Wilt. I allow to say hell.
We're all adults here.
All right. And he had the opportunity to make a ton of money, I think $50,000 in 1957. Bought his parents a home in West Philly on Top Street Parkway with it. They had to lower the floor so Wilt wouldn't bump his head. He loved the Globetrotters experience and got into Europe and traveled for the rest of his life. Split in former Yugoslavia, one of his favorite places. went to Hawaii in the '70s, got into Miami, the beach scene where they're rumored to be very attractive women in Miami. Wilt like that. He moved to Los Angeles in '68 and owned a condo in Hawaii during the '70s. He was thinking of moving to Vancouver, Washington for the time being. I believe there was a relationship with a woman. I never did find out who that was, but he loved to show off his extraordinary body and strength, and even as a young man, appreciated the value of exercise and diet. He never forgot he was Black, but wasn't obsessed with it. That's a key point, in my opinion, about Wilt's psyche and how he lived his life. Most of his closest friends and all of his advisors were white, I would add, Jewish, American white. Ike Richmond, Stan Warber, the Kutchers, Milton Kutcher. He never, but he had Black friends, some going back to childhood, with whom he regularly talked, and I spoke to a number of them. Jimmy Sadler was one. Martin Hughes spoke to him a couple of weeks before he died. Wilt supported a Republican candidate for president, for which the Black community tore into him. He was proud when Blacks succeeded and quietly made donations to help aspiring Black athletes and causes. His battles were not over color. One of his professional teammates, I think Tom Masheri, said he thought he had the sensitivity and temperament of an artist. I don't know if I could go that far, or a little Norris, but another called him a pussycat. He acknowledged he did not have the killer instinct in sports. And Wilt told Tommy Kearns, a friend of his, who was in that famous NCAA triple overtime between Kansas and NC State. He said to Tommy Kearns that he wished that he had been. This is Tommy telling me, and I quoted in the book, that he wished he had had more of the killer instinct with Bill Russell. Wilt was not a nasty person. It's very interesting. He was very likable, as I found out. I interviewed 150 people for the book. Wilt was dead. They could have said nasty things about him, and they all said nice things. They said he had his moments, he could be a pain, he was demanding, but he was a terrific person. And deeds speak louder than words. I have a lot of deeds in the book where Wilt's generosity and large heart come into play. He claimed he made love to 20,000 women, for which he was lambasted, ridiculed, and made the butt of jokes. A business wanted to pay him to advertise its products with the line, "It satisfies more women than Wilt Chamberlain." To which Wilt said, "Who said I satisfied?" Can you? I forget your name. The person, Mike. Move it. I can't see you. I'd like to look at.
No, that's good.
You're blocked by something. No, just move where you can. He was a great supporter of women's athletics, and his involvement had nothing to do with sex. Wilt's post-basketball career, he popularized more than any other person, except some of those beautiful gals in bikinis, volleyball. It's in the Volleyball Hall of Fame. I went to the Volleyball Hall of Fame in that Holyoke, Mass. Wilt traveled the country with some great volleyball players, and he was great because of his size and athleticism. It's a bit of a myth that people say to me, Wilt was one of the greatest volleyball players ever. He wasn't that. He took the game up late, but he was still formidable. And he supported with money and time a junior women's track, girls, not women, 14-year-old girls, 12-year-old track team in LA. I like these stories about Wilt. I hope that you all feel the same. And I quote one of the members, one of the elder girls on that team, a two-time Olympian, Hattie Van Volvalier, saying how Wilt would drive from LA to San Diego. This is post-basketball. And he started raking the long jump pit. And he was like a mother hen to some of these girls. And one of them told me, "I like boys. I wasn't 12 years old. And Wilt was getting on me for spending too much time away from track." And again, it shows how Wilt, who's very wealthy, could do anything, go any place, spent his post-basketball career. He publicized volleyball and he sponsored and publicized track. Wilt, far away, Wilt, Will love track as his first love. And I contend, I may be wrong about this. Excuse me. I contend that Will could have been a medalist, maybe a gold medalist in the decathlon with one asterisk. Everybody knows what the decathlon is, 10 events in track and field. Wilt won the public league shot put championship 2 times. And Kansas was then a great powerhouse in track. Wilt's roommate of Kansas, Charlie Tidwell, tragically committed suicide. Will had nothing to do with it. He was a world record holder in some of the sprints for a time, Charlie Tidwell. And the other great, Jim Ryan, the great miler, went to Kansas. Wilt competed it was then the Big 7 or Big 8. Now Kansas is part of the Big 11. Every other week they change these they line on. But it was a first class track program, and one meet Wilt came in second place to Charlie Dumas, the world record holder. My contention is that if Wilt were allowed to compete in track when he was in his prime, I'm warming up. Wilt thought and said publicly that he was thinking of retiring from basketball after his first season with the Warriors, and it's a serious thing. People were going to pay him a lot of money to tour Europe, but he decided not to. Of course, went on to play basketball for 14 seasons. Every pro team, and this isn't me saying it, it's Al Adel saying it to me, NBA player, teammate of Wilt's, when the Warriors both when they were in Philadelphia, and then when Eddie Gottlieb sold the team and they went to San Francisco. Anybody who's played basketball, you run from side to side is one of the exercises. Wilt was always the fastest man on the team. Wilt at 7'1". Stan Lorber told me they measured Wilt and he was 7'1" and 116. I never see that, and I use that figure in the book because Stan was the man to me. I knew Wilt and was his medical advisor for 40 years, dear friends. I'm losing my, what was that? I was talking about Wilt and, oh yeah, in Overbrook, he won the shot put championship, great track. He was the fastest man on any team. His stamina is legendary. One of Wilt's college teammates, Monty Johnson, became athletic director in Kansas years after college, told me that he never saw Wilt tire. And that they would run and they'd go to the coach and say, if we try to keep up with Wilt, we're going to die. And Wilt led one of Wilt's greatest records. There's so many. I haven't checked lately, but a couple of years ago, I was honored to be invited by the Library of Commerce. I'm very proud of this, to write about Wilt's 100-point game. There's a tape of the last quarter of the 100-point game, and they asked me to write a commentary about it. Wilt held 68 individual records and shared some, so he held 72. Probably second is Michael Jordan or Kareem, that they may hold 10 or 15. Nobody's even close to him. To me, one of his most impressive records in the NBA is he led the league in minutes played. I hope I get this. It's either 8 or 9 seasons. Even authors don't remember everything. It's an amazing stat, and he didn't like to come out of a game, and it was hard for him to warm up. And Eddie Gottlieb, his employer and a giant in the game of basketball, Eddie Gottlieb owned the Philadelphia Warriors, the first team that Wilt played for, the 58-59 season. Eddie Gottlieb said many times Wilt always gave you your money's worth, the employer. He was a pain in the you-know-what to negotiate with Eddie Gottlieb, but he gave his all. I don't even know where I am. I mean, in my presentation, but yeah, that he would. I think he would have been great decathlete if his weight, if the pole vaults of that day could have held his weight. And I want to speak to some engineer or something and ask them about that, because Wilt would have prevailed in the shot put, the discus, he could have learned that in 3 weeks and I'm exaggerating. He would have been a great discus thrower, a great shot putter, a great javelin thrower. He would have been won the broad jump or the triple jump, whatever it's called. That was what he competed in college. He would have been fabulous in the 100-meter run and the 15-meter. He would have been, in my opinion, if I ever get to heavens, there's a God, and we talk about sports, I'll say, could Will have been in the God? You know more than any of us. I think he would have, only if that oval didn't split in half. I think I digress from my reading of the thriller. I hope you don't mind, because when I speak, I like to enjoy myself as well as inform and hopefully entertain you all. He said he never married because he liked the freedom to make love to many women. I need a note from your parents. You're really glad. Thank you for coming. He said he never married because he liked the freedom to make love to many women. Although he also said that it's better to make love to the same woman 1,000 times than to 1,000 different women one time. His nomadic, this is me writing. All of it's me writing. I don't think his nomadic, I'm convinced his nomadic lifestyle didn't lend itself to being married. And there are trade-offs in life, as we all know, and that was one of his trade-offs. He played always with gusto, polo, tennis, volleyball, and paddleball. He also water skied and ran track. He regularly played checkers, dominoes, and backgammon, all of them exceedingly well. He played backgammon with Lucille Ball, I Love Lucy fame, one of Hollywood's better players. I whipped her ass, he later told me in an interview. This is Lucy. Will, watch your life. He befriended the terminally ill 60-year-old granddaughter of one of his professional teammates and called her every Friday night the last 15 months of her life. They talked for 45 minutes. People in interviews and others say, why did you write this book about Will? I read an article one Friday night after, I think it was after Wilt's first his funeral in LA and the Philly service. He was cremated. His ashes were distributed to his relatives, siblings, and his Ed Solari, a really good writer, Daily News, wrote about high school sports, wrote about Stephanie Arison, the granddaughter of the great Paul Arison. Most of the people this age know the fabulous Paul Arison, a two-time NBA scoring champion, a great person. Stephanie Arison writes Will a fan letter when he's in Los Angeles playing for the Lakers or retired. I'm not sure that detail. It's in the article, I'm sure. Will, being Will, he gets hundreds of fan letters from all over the world. He keeps them in trash bags, but she answers them. Sister Barbara would write, tell her, Babs, write this person, say this, say that. The letter's there for 2 years, and Will discovers it and feels badly or bad. He knows English better than I do, right here, right? Will feels badly about not responding, calls Paul Arison up and says, she must think I'm a jerk. The girl writes me a fan letter, I don't respond. And then Paul Arison informs Will that Stephanie Arison is just diagnosed with terminal brain tumor. Will calls her on the phone, and she has 6 to 12 months to live. Will calls her on the phone, they click, and he says, I'm going to speak to you every Friday night. And for the rest of this dear young girl's life, Wilt Chamberlain, wherever he was in the country and the world, and Wilt was always on the move. He'd get up and decide he wanted to go to Hawaii, or go to Italy, or go to Chicago. Wilt spoke to her, and I read the article, and it brought tears to my eyes, and said to me, there's a Wilt Chamberlain that I did not know about, and I'd like to know more about it. And I assume fans will too. That motivated me to write the book. Wilt built his dream house of redwood and canyon stone on 3 acres atop California, Santa Monica Mountains overlooking the San Fernando Valley and the Pacific Ocean. It took 5 railroad cars worth of redwood to build the triangular shaped home. There was not a right angle in Wilt's home. I was lucky enough to be there 2 times. The second time was only me and an exterminator taking care of some bees. And it was wonderful to be there. I was tempted to take a photograph, but Cy Goldberg trusted me enough to let me. That's his executive buddy, lawyer. And it was an amazing house. Wilt said, I wanted the feeling of the house to be like the Baptist church I remember when I was growing up, he said. And then I say in parentheses, there are not many Baptist churches have a big circular room furnished with a waterbed. He loved music and was learning to play the saxophone in the last months of his life. He was fascinated with the stars in the sky, not the phony ones in Hollywood. His bedroom had a retractable roof through which he gazed into space using an expensive telescope. He usually slept with the roof open, better to experience the balmy California nights and to gaze at something bigger than himself, the universe. He was a very interesting guy. I'm not saying he's Michelangelo or Albert Einstein, but he's very interesting, bright, interesting, did a lot of things in a short life. He died at 63. He got lonesome late at night, especially in the last years of his life when declining health kept him at home. He needed a hip replacement and he should have done it, but he didn't do it. And then he had type 2 diabetes and he always had a heart that was a little, he had heart trouble and eventually died of heart disease. He'd call his friends up in the East and wake many of them up and say, do you know how many people live in Shanghai? It was his way of starting conversation, most of these conversations lasting for hours. He was a world-class competitor and he loved to argue about anything. He cheated at games, notorious for cheating, but not in the sport that made him famous. His death in October 1999 at age 63 shocked the sports world, particularly his contemporaries, to whom he was Superman. And oh yes, he also played basketball. What time? I didn't.
25 after 7.
Oh, so I started at 7. It's already 25 minutes.
Keep going.
We're good. Let me, yes, Don, yeah, ask me, yeah.
All that you said, some of us, maybe you follow Wilt closer than others, just always had a lot of respect for him. But they don't know all the stories. Today, it doesn't appear that whatever generation we're in, they have no idea. And he doesn't have the cachet or the respect or the dominance that when you talk about, you know, Mickey Mantle or Willie Mays. So why don't everybody talk about Wilt all the time? Anyway, any theories on why maybe Kareem or Bill Russell sometimes are thought more highly of?
It's a good point. I think that Russell did have a better press. I don't know the answer. You know, I'd have to, somebody here with young kids or grandkids or something like, no. By the way, that was Don DeJulia, the long time and well thought of, well regarded athletic director at St. Joe's, and a good man and a basketball player. He played high school ball. Who'd you play with?
In college.
And college, thank you.
Your boy Wally.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I played 2 years of varsity basketball at Overbrook with Walt Hazard, who went on to UCLA and started the first of John Wooden's great UCLA teams, and Wally Jones, who went to Villanova, great player, played with Will in 66, 67, 60. Let me jump. I can jump all over the place, and I said, talk to Will all night. Talk about Will all night. I want to talk about Will being a loser. The rap against Will. Why didn't Wilt's teams beat the Celtics more? And as I say in the book, there were 9 reasons. Russell played with 8 future Hall of Famers, and the 9th was one of, if not the greatest coach ever, Red Auerbach. Wilt didn't have the great teams that Boston had, and Boston had luck on their side, the luck of the Irish, luck in life would live long enough. Helps when last second the ball, Don Nelson's hit the rim and goes up and falls in. They beat the Wilt's team. Havlicek steals the ball. Another example. And died in the ball. Sports fans, basketball fans know what I'm referring to. My contention is that Wiltz didn't have the firepower along with him as Russell did. And it's not just my contention. I'll quote, and I do in the book, Leonard Copper, great sports writer, wrote for the New York papers, baseball and basketball, and the author of about 15 books, really fine person. One of my favorite interview. Leonard Copper said, Wilt played on teams, if you would switch places, Wilt's team would have, with the Celtics, would have been even more dominant. Though respected sports writer Bob Ryan, he's a Boston, covered Boston, the Celtics for the Boston Globe. And Cousy writes in his book that Russell made people around him better than Wilt. I don't buy that. Often I'm asked in interviews, and it's the greatest centers, and I say Wilt is the greatest big man who ever played the game. And I would put Kareem second. I used to have Shaq second, but I put Kareem and then Wilt, Shaq, Russell, 5. Russell was 6'10". Shaq and Kareem and Wilt, if he were with mediocre players, I think would be. He's a great player, Bill Russell, but he didn't have the physical ability of these other players. David Robinson. Now the fellow from Denver's changing. You know, basketball is so different now. People often ask me in interviews, how would Wilt thrive? How would Wilt compete in today's NBA with the 3-point shot? And my answer is as follows. I'll give you a longer answer to get to my point. Wilt would have shot less like he did his last years with the LA Lakers. People don't realize this. I forgot it. I just read it a couple of days ago, started preparing for this. He averaged 14 points a game with the Lakers. He was great at getting the rebound, throwing it out to Jerry West and Gail Goodrich, who played with Will Hazard. I was going to say my teammate. I was Will Hazard's teammate. And they ran. So he would have shot less, rebounded. Will was an unbelievable defender. He could guard someone from 6'8" to 7'5". They're making and the guy's great. I looked at the game last night for about 5 minutes. I can't watch most NBA games except the playoffs. The 7'4" kid from Paris. He's great. He handles the ball like a guard, but he's skinny and he'll lift weights. Wilt was an unbelievable defender, rebounder, and could always score. If you want to see something great and fun, if you've never seen it, there's a YouTube video. Wilt's a Laker, and he's jiving with one of his Lakers teammates. I forget who it was, or I didn't recognize it. Wilt says, this is from about 18 feet out. Here's the basket, and Wilt is here, the hardest angle. There's the foul line. Wilt's throwing, he says, I'm going to make 5 hook shots. I'll do it this way. 5 hook shots in a row. And the guy says, I'll bet you $5 you can't. My jaw dropped. Will had a feathery touch. He's throwing up these 18 or 15-foot shots. He makes 5 in a row, wins the bet. Will had a very nice touch. He couldn't shoot fouls. It was in his head when he was in. And there's a great, Wilt says, it's an apocryphal story, but I read about it. He went to a psychologist or psychiatrist about his foul shooting problems, and it ended up the psychiatrist could make 7 out of 10 foul shots. It's apocryphal, but I like this story. Yes, please.
I was in high school. Wilt was maybe 2 years ahead of me, and there was this sense in me, and I don't know how it played out, that this would be a great man for all times. there
for all
was,
times?
he would not be.
Oh,
There was the idea, okay, there was, he would formulate, you know, there was a narrow, the area in front of the basket,
the lane.
the lane was narrow. He would be up there and there was no goaltending law,
Correct.
and he would make a funnel with his hands so that his teammates could.
Right, so, yeah, Jimmy Sadler told me he was angry with Wilt. So you're saying that there are people who didn't think Wilt would go on to be great.
But,
I beg to differ with you,
well,
and I'll tell you why.
Okay, but I want to hear that.
Yeah.
But, you know, so I would see him play in a small gymnasium. And, you know, obviously you want to see this man. And then I think it was playing at the arena for a championship or something.
No, the Warriors played some games at the arena.
And it was my conviction that Ray Scott, who played for West Philadelphia,
Yes,
would be the better player because he could hit corner shots. So, you know, the idea of when it became kind of universal that this is Superman. I mean, I would see him at track, at cross country meets where he would come out. Overbrook had the best team by far.
right.
In cross country. And he would come out just, you know, regular clothes, to watch the people in his pool.
He competed at Overbrook. He won the shot put championship
You
2
know,
years.
but I'm talking about cross country.
Okay, all right, sorry, I missed that, yeah.
And so he would come out and be like one of the guys, you know, people, but you know, my experience is seeing somebody that tall and being able to step over things so effortlessly, but it didn't really gel that I was seeing a phenomenon for all time. But I wonder how come that is.
It wasn't, I'll tell you why, you're entitled to your opinion about Ray Scott, I'll tell you why. When Wilt graduated from before he graduated, hundreds of college, 100, I forget the total, 120, 140, wanted Wilt to come. And Life magazine, is people of a certain age, it was the most popular general magazine, general circulation magazine in the country, and a great magazine. Devoted 5 or 7 pages to the story of Wilt being recruited to Kansas. People knew that he was phenomenal. Eddie Gottlieb had the NBA change the rules. That's where the territorial draft rule came. That's where it came, because Eddie Gottlieb said, this kid is I'm gonna draft him. And that's why he didn't want Wilt to go to a New England school where the Celtics could have drafted him. And regarding Ray Scott, who's a great guy. Wow,
No, I'm not trying.
no, you're entitled, you know, everybody's entitled.
It's not gonna happen.
No, I'm saying,
Idea.
most people knew that Wilt was going to be phenomenal. When he was in touch,
People knew it, for sure.
okay, fine. And any other questions? Yes,
Can you
please.
say more about the foul shooting? What happened to him? I saw him with the under, he
It's,
started
yeah,
to do that. What was going on with him?
Cecil Mosenson, Wilt's coach at Overbrook. I interviewed him and watched a film of Wilt's. When Wilt was younger, he had a nicer, guys who play basketball, he had a nice arc to his shot.
Yeah.
It became a head case. Wilt, he moved 1 year, he tried here and tried.
Then he tried the other hand, like back in the
Rick,
40s.
yeah. It was, I think it was mental, because if you guys who saw Wilt play, and I wish there were women here, but there aren't.
Hey,
Oh, that's great. No,
but I'm not a basketball player. You
I
can tell
wouldn't
by
be
my
here,
height.
but for one, let me thank her again. It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. The bank shot, Will had a nice 15, 18-foot bank shot. It was, coaches didn't like it because it took him away from the basket.
Is it true he shot 22 for like 26 the night he scored 100 points?
He set a record.
Yeah.
As I write in the book, God has a sense of humor, because Will, yeah, I have the stat, it's like
28 and 30.
28.
is it, thank you, yeah, yeah. It was a head, he admitted it, there's a TV clip of him, it was psychological. When I saw Will, the first time I saw it was about 5 years ago, anybody who's played the game, he had this beautiful soft hook shot. A hook shot to me was the most difficult shot, a jump shot or a straight foul shot is much easier. He had a touch, he was a very gifted player. Any other, yes, please.
Can you talk a little bit about his relationship with Philly? Over the years, how did that change? How did the city feel towards him? And what's his legacy as a Philadelphian? Because I don't necessarily, to the comment earlier about the next generation,
Yeah.
I don't hear him thought of as one of the great products of Philadelphia necessarily.
No, it's
How the relationship evolved over the years.
thank you for asking. It's a great question. Nobody's ever asked it. I'll jump to Will was influenced by going to Overbrook, and his parents were the great influence on his life and growing up with people they remained friendly with. He was proud of being from Philly. He kept, if I may. Will wore his Overbrook letter jacket in Kansas. There's a great picture in my book about it. And he used to go, sometimes wear the leather jacket after his career. Eddie Gottlieb wanted to caddy in, so he sold the Warriors in '65 to San Francisco, which was not a basketball town. Will went there, he loved San Francisco, it's a great city. I spent a lot of time there when I worked in a newspaper in Arizona. And then he was traded back to Philadelphia, but he didn't want to come. And the persons who owned the Philadelphia 76ers, it was the old Syracuse National franchise, Ike Richmond and Irv Kozlov owned the Sixers. The name came from the contest. Somebody said 1776, let's call it 1776. Will, he liked being back in Philly, but in those days, remember, now Tiger Woods and so many other celebrities, black can have white women, Asian, nobody cares about it. Tiger Woods had a beautiful blonde wife, they got divorced. Will liked other women, he liked white women, and he lived in New York, he owned a cafe in New York. He lived one season in New York, and I criticized Dolph Shays, who's a great guy. He said to me, I'm not much of a basketball coach. So Will had this ambivalence. He was so big, literally and figuratively, that Philly was a small town to him. He was proud to be from Philly, but how could Philly compare to LA? Then Ike Richmond owned half of the 76ers, and supposedly, Will claims, Ike promised Will half of his 50%. And I asked Stan Lorber, who was the doctor of all of these guys, it's all a circle. The accountant, they were all, he's the accountant for the team, for Wilt, for Ike Richmond, blah, blah, blah. And Stan Lorber said, I wouldn't have been surprised to me that Ike was a father figure to Wilt and Wilt's lawyer and Wilt's employer, kind of a conflict of interest. Ike Richmond has a heart attack. He's sitting on the bench when the Sixers are playing Boston, and Ike's wife was watching her husband fatal heart attack. He dies. So these were some of the things that Will went through, and then he was angry at Irv Kozlov for not acknowledging that Ike promised him 25% of the Sixers. And Irv Kozlov, we all know his son Teddy, was interviewed in this Goliath, the documentary that I and Wally and Sonny Hill and others are in. Irv Kozlov said, where's the piece of paper, Wilt, that proves it? And there was none. And Wilt was angry at that. And after they lost to the Celtics, they beat the Celtics finally for Wilt's first championship in 66, 67. They lost in 67, 68. Wilt wanted to go to LA where interracial dating was easier, nice weather. And he left, and there's a lot of bitterness in him, and for many years he refused to come back for the Sixers to honor him, but eventually he did. So I hope I'm, answering some of the factors that, and I'm sad to hear that Wilt doesn't receive the acclaim as being one of Philadelphia's son. But I guess that's life. The other, yes, please.
How did he, of all the schools in the country, how did he pick Kansas?
Very good question. Remember, part of it was that Eddie Gottlieb didn't want him to go up north. This was before LA, before UCLA became a power. He didn't want to go in the South. It was the segregated South in 1959, 60, 55. Wilt graduated from Overbrook in June. He went to the Midwest. All the schools offered him money under the table. I don't know as a fact. Well, let's say many. It stands to reason that they made arrangements. Kansas was coached by Fog Allen, one of the great coaches in college basketball history. At one time, he held the record for most victories. So Wilt, and it's a nice place. I spent 2 very nice weeks, 2 1-week trips to Kansas. I loved it. So it was a great basketball school and a great track school, as I said earlier. So he wasn't going to go to the colder New England. He wasn't going to go to the segregated South. The West had nothing in those days. And Kansas, the Midwest, Ohio State, the great Jerry Lucas teams. That's why he chose Kansas. The problem was that his game didn't develop because opponents held the ball and beat the heck out of him. Yes.
I guess the question is why didn't he stay to St. Joe's of Villanova or Penn or whatever?
He wanted, because Wilt was Wilt. He wanted to go away to school. As who didn't want to? A lot of people wanted to go away. Yes, of course, Temple, they were great teams. St. Joe's, Villanova.
Guy Rogers.
Yeah, etc. Yeah, of course. Philly's a great basketball town, great music town, great food town. He wanted to go get away, and he enjoyed Kansas, the jazz scene in Kansas City. I write about it. Yes, Tom.
Did you interview Dougie Lehman?
Yes, I did.
Mentioned in the book.
Yeah.
Utah.
I interviewed. Doug was a teammate of
high
Wilt.
school.
Yeah.
And
He drove with Wilt, drove them to Kansas together.
right.
And then Doug, he was
Dougie
hard
tells
struck.
the story.
He left after a few days. Yeah, Wilt, yeah,
That was
Kansas
part of
was,
the deal. I'll come to Kansas, you give Dougie a scholarship too, and Dougie did.
I don't know that. I'm not saying Dougie is wrong. I don't know. I know this though. Wilt's friends, Vince Miller and other black teammates, were angry that they didn't get scholarships. But as I say in the book, I don't know that they had the academic requirements to go. In those days, before the great schools were, big schools were recruiting blacks from West Philly and Overbrook and other places went to the black schools and down south, where Earl Monroe went. So, yeah, I interviewed Doug. Kansas was segregated when Wilt got there, and he was going to leave. He went to the president of the school and said, "I ain't standing for you." I'm paraphrasing. They better integrate the school. A lot of people knock Wilt for not being more active in civil rights. He did a lot. He just did a lot of things privately, and that certainly. He was thrilled. He was invited to Martin Luther King's funeral. Any other questions? Yes, please.
I knew a guy by the name of Bob Devine.
I know the name. Yeah, who?
He played at West, and
Oh yeah. The story. Tell.
well, the story that he told me, I asked him.
It's in my book about the dying.
Well, no,
They're standing on the table.
no.
Tell the story.
I don't have the book, and I need to get the book.
I'll shut up.
I have a question about your cover art too. Bob, I asked Bob how they defeated Overbrook
Yeah.
in the city title game. And he said, we put 4 guys on Wilt and we have 1 guy running around waving and screaming at everybody else.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, is that true?
It is true. And the other story regarding it is that they had a father stand on the table down with people who had a broom or something to be like Wilt. The key thing there is that Overbrook's other players were horrible and shot a poor percentage. I have it in the book. And it's a relevant fact because when Kansas lost Wilt's sophomore year, you couldn't play college ball that had to play on the freshman team. When Kansas and met NCAA in North Carolina, Frank McGuire, hell of a coach, friend of, well, he coached Wilt later at the Warriors. All these guys from New York, one of whom was Tommy Kearns in my interview. Wilt's teammates choked, they just, or I don't know if they choked, they shot a horrible percentage. Wilt played well in the championship game. And that started the myth that Wilt was a loser when they lost in that triple overtime game. Wilt was named the most valuable player of the tournament on the losing team. And it's sad to me when people say Wilt was a loser. Hey, he was not a loser in basketball, and he was not a loser in life. I think he had a good life, died all too young at 63. Yes,
Can I
please.
get this wrong?
Wait, I'm sorry, promise.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah,
My question is, my comment is, I was to Sunny Hill on Sundays, you know.
yeah,
And I always give education on Sunny Hill,
Yeah.
so I was writing some names down, the names you mentioned. I knew a game named Guy Rogers, Sunny Hill mentioned him, you know.
yeah,
History there, but my son has a question, he.
sure. Thanks for coming.
I'm a junior at LaSalle University.
What?
I'm a junior at LaSalle University.
Good for you.
I was wondering if Wilt Chamberlain talked to Tom, if you ever talked to Tom Gola at all.
I'm trying to think, I know, I love Tom Gola as a young boy, had one of the greatest collegiate careers ever. I did not interview Tom Gola. I write about him in the book. It's a great stat that I love to freak out as I'm going to. The 59-60 Warriors had 5 players who all went to high school in Philadelphia and were all Americans. Ernie Beck, that All-American at Penn, still holds records, or he did a few years ago. Guy Rogers from Northeast High went to Temple, so it's Ernie Beck. Went to what, I don't know what school, was it West Catholic? West Catholic. So Tom Gola, LaSalle, Paul Arison, LaSalle High School, not college. Wilt Overbrook, Guy Rogers, Northeast. Who's the 5th? Wait, Rogers. Wilt. I'm blanking out. No, the 5th guy on the team. There's never in history a team of professional athletes where 5 guys.
Hallier.
No, and I don't, it's the Warriors. It was, wait,
Oh, and the Warriors, Hallier.
Paul Arison, Ernie Beck, Wilt,
That's
Guy
fine.
Rogers.
Nola.
And Gola, that's 5, yes. It's an amazing stack. It's a great part. You know, we should be proud, those of us who went to Philly High School. Never, unless somebody comes up with it where it happened. Yes, please. So I didn't, yeah.
Well, I'm Roman Catholic, actually, high school.
Yeah,
And
Stevie Morris.
Yeah, exactly, I was gonna say that, yeah.
Great. Philly's a great basketball town. Yes, please.
According to the stories I've heard, I went to LaSalle High School. Paul Arison didn't play there. The coach didn't think he was good enough. He went to Villanova.
Yeah, and thank you. I wondered, like, I have it in the book that he didn't play it.
I can't think of the gentleman's name, and he coached there for a million years, but
Wait, you mean he didn't?
UV O'Brien.
Okay. Yes, please.
Do you know why what's Overbrook rather than West Philly? If you look close to West Philly.
He lived in Salford, right off of Haverford Avenue. My guess was that Overbrook had a great tradition of basketball. Jackie Moore, Hal Lear, guys who predated. At one time, I have it in the book, Overbrook had sent more graduates. At one time, there were more Overbrook High School graduates playing professional baseball than Temple, Villanova, Cincinnati, San Diego. There were 12 Overbrook graduates who made the pros, and only DeWitt Clinton in New York, as of when I wrote the book in 2004, had more guys who went into the pros. It's an amazing tradition of basketball at Overbrook. Yes, please.
How long did it take you to like do the research and write the book?
Almost 5 years. I spent 3 years. Thanks for the question. I spent 3 years crisscrossing the country, speaking to the most important people in Wilt's life. 2 years writing. I spoke to his college teammates, his high school coach, 3 of his pro coaches, his doctor, lawyer, accountant, a girlfriend, and all kinds of people who spoke to me, not because of me, but because of Wilt. It's a point I would emphasize. They have great things to say, Will could be a pain, but you know what? But people liked him, and Dick Schaap, the great sports writer, I quote him in the book. He said, look, my politics were closer to Russell's. I'm a liberal Democrat, but Russell was not a likable person. And Wilt was a lovable person. This is Dick's renowned. I love one of my favorite interviews with Dick Schaap in New York.
Question here.
Yeah.
So you touched on how he had a bit of a resentment towards Philadelphia at the end as far as career goes.
Yeah.
How about you mentioned his big heart, his generosity later on in life. How about his neighborhood?
Thank you.
What about that?
Yeah, not the neighborhood. Wilt died, he left his estate to charity. His sister and the cousins, the Wilt Chamberlain charity, he gave money to Kansas, an Operation Smile, the doctors that fixed the foreign lips. He gave, this is the man, he gave the bulk of it, he gave some money to his family, but the bulk of Wilt's estate, and it's based in Philadelphia, the Wilt Chamberlain Foundation. I don't know the details of the gifts, but Billy Cunningham, I think, is with whom Wilt was pretty friendly from their days. Money from Wilt's legacy has helped
It's
people in
here.
Philadelphia.
Okay.
I don't know that it's a good question.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, if he didn't come back here
No,
for
no, he
career
gave,
reasons,
yeah.
if he came back to his
He gave money.
neighborhood, his town, okay.
Yeah, not the neighborhood, but through the foundation, which is still around. Yes, please.
I remember reading, tell me if I'm wrong, Wilt was 50 and he came back to the Sixers. And he said, if I play, I guarantee I'll get 25 rebounds in every game. Did that?
Yeah,
And they said they didn't take him because the other players felt he would suck the air out of that's what they wrote in the paper at the time. After the game, they'd only talk to Wilt.
Yeah.
Is that true that he did that?
I don't know the specifics of that with the Sixers, but if they wrote it, Philly had good reporters, George Casada, Miss Sandy Grady, et cetera. Teams approached Wilt about coming back when he was older. Wilt was smart enough not to, but he was a phenomenal shape from track and volleyball. When Wilt was 50, a buddy of his who worked out with him in LA, he used to curl 110-pound dumbbell. So 50, and there's a picture in the book with Wilt, Jimmy Sadler's picture when Wilt was 50. You see his magnificent physique. Could Wilt play at 50? Probably yes,
Rebound,
but not.
he said.
What?
Did he rebound? He would rebound.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It wouldn't have been the 28-year-old or 32-year-old. Well, he had other things. And he once said, do I want to be driving through a snowstorm in Cleveland or be in Hawaii with girls in bikinis? I'll take Hawaii. And Wilt, yes.
How close did the Wilt Ali fight thing come?
Great question. Yeah, it's a great question. You will know that
Yes.
a number of times Wilt talked about retiring from basketball. Some of it, there was a legitimacy to it. He once worked out for Hank Strand, the great football coach, and he said he'd be an unbelievable. And twice or maybe 3 times he toyed with the idea of fighting Muhammad Ali. I'll get to the most serious that almost came. There was a contract, there was a press conference at the Astrodome. They were going to fight. Wilt and Ali liked each other, admired each other, and liked each other. Wilt goes to the men's room to discuss something with Alan Levitt, who's told me the story. Alan Levitt was Wilt's accountant, the team accountant, Wilt's advisor. He remembered Wilt's mother's address where he would send a check every month. When after her husband died, she moved back. The fight was scheduled. Wilt's in the men's room at the Astrodome, and Alan, I think it was Alan, or excuse me, it's in the book. He says, Wilt, you're great, you're strong. And I'll quote Jack McKinney, who wrote for the Daily News. He said, if they fought in a telephone booth, Wilt would prevail, but they ain't going to fight in a telephone booth, in a ring. Alan said to Wilt, you can be embarrassed. And Wilt backed out when they came out of the men's room. So it's not a myth. They were going, the contract, the deal was set. And Wilt said, I don't want to do it. And I think He did it because he didn't want to be humiliated. And Ali would have knocked him out, I think.
So I remember on the Wild World.
It's a great picture, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Howard Cosell.
Yeah.
And Will had a. Had
The
a pen,
reach.
had a pen which said he wanted Ali to sign.
I don't remember that, but there's a famous picture, it's in my book, of it shows Will driving Ali, and he had like a 12 or 14-inch advantage in height. I'm glad he didn't fight Ali. Yes, please, yeah.
Do you have a sense of what kind of routine was like during like the peak of his career? Like,
Great.
Someone that would like show up at the gym at like 4 a.m, or like after a game, go back and shoot for another couple hours, or.
Good question. I would guess that after the game, Wilt wanted to go dancing and stuff. But that he, as Stan Lord told me, he was always in shape. Where the answer is, you can see it on YouTube, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was Mr. Universe, worked out with Will. And they made this awful movie, Conan the Barbarian. But it shows Will on YouTube throwing, Arnold Schwarzenegger said Will was the strongest man ever, or the strongest man in the country. I don't know the details of it, but he worked out all the time. And you can see it on YouTube when he was post-basketball. I don't think during the his career, I don't know what it was.
Do you think he loved basketball, the game of basketball?
Great question. I think he loved track, I know he loved track more. And he loved challenges. Wilt's Michigas, to use the Yiddish. He didn't want to be thought of as a big goon, the term from the 50s. He liked basketball was an avenue for him to make a lot of money, to let his parents, who were hardworking, lower middle class, have a good life. He liked the Harlem Globetrotters. You'd have to talk to one of Wilt, somebody who knew him. My guess is that he regretted that he couldn't participate in track when professionals were not allowed to compete. And there was so much pressure on this guy that he was miserable because everything was on his head. When the team lost, you blame Will. He had, one night he had 60 points against Russell. He has the rebounding record against Bill Russell, but it was never enough for people. When he got older, and I thank you for the question, Will tore his knee, and that's an interesting thing that I can get into if you want to hear it. He tore his knee up. He rehabbed and amazingly came back and played when doctors said he may never play again. He came back. The fans appreciated in LA and around. People started to appreciate him more and like him more. But he always, and Jerry West talks about it, and I quote him, that Will once said to Jerry West, "Why are they booing me?" And that's where it leads to his famous statement, "Nobody loves Goliath." Wilt's impression of himself, part of his psyche, and I don't want to get too carried away, but I think it's fair to say that he had scars from being so tall, from disappointing. It was never enough for some people. Yet they're great fans of Wilt. So we were talking earlier. I interviewed people I put an ad paper on radio. Anybody who has a Wilt story, after I heard all these great things about Wilt, WIP devoted a day to Wilt stories. People called me up and they said, "I loved Wilt," and that's in the book. That there are many fans around the country who loved Wilt Chamberlain. One guy, I'll paraphrase him, he said, "I cried when my parents died, I cried when Jackie Gleason died, and I sobbed when Wilt died."
Can you explain some of the difficulty between him preferring to be called Dipper versus Stilt?
Yeah, the Daily News, one of the Daily News writers tagged Wilt with the nickname when he was in 11th grade at Overbrook, Wilt the Stilt. And he hated it because it was the image to him of some prehistoric bird or some gawky thing. The names that Wilt liked, and his high school friends, of whom friends and classmates called him Dippy. I met many of them. Mel Brodsky, great player at Temple. they called him Dipper Dippy, and he got that name from bending down when he'd enter homes in West Philly or the basement. He liked Dip, Dippy, Dipper, the Big Dipper. He had it monogrammed on his cuffs. The door of his home had Big Dipper, Ursa Major, and his stationery had Ursa Major, which is Latin. I don't. My daughter knows Latin. I don't, for Big Dipper. So he hated the name Wilt the Stilt, but that's the name that was stuck. It's another scar that he bore. And throughout the book, I like to quote people saying Wilt was not a tall goon. He was a great athlete. And many people back then did not recognize it. Anybody who's fair and will see both sides of something does know that he was an extraordinary basketball player and athlete.
Did he know that? Did he feel that? Or when you say he got blamed?
As I said before, I think that there were some scars. Wilt stuttered he stuttered as a kid, and they put him in the backward. It was called OV or something. I don't know what
Orthogenically backward.
Thank you, Jerry. A Philly boy like myself. These are scars that you don't get over. This documentary that I was in and all these other people, I learned things in it that Wilt's family went and bitched about them putting Wilt in this class. Wilt was a bright guy. I'm not saying he's a Stafford Einstein, but that left scars. And even later on, I watched so many clips. I went to NBA, what's it called? In Secaucus, New Jersey, the NBA
Headquarters.
Thank you. And watched them. And Wilt had the stutter. Even you can see it on YouTube. He covered it up. But he was in this class for backward kids where he didn't belong there. And I'm proud that I verified it was so. Barbara Chamberlain didn't like my putting it in the book, but it's in the documentary, because in the documentary, I did not know the family went and said, Wilt doesn't belong here. They put him in a regular class. They're scars. And in those days, those of us old enough, what's the weather like up there? That's what people said to tall people.
Spit on the tell it's raining.
Yeah. So that's Wilt. Yeah.
Wilt's from Philly, you're a Philly guy. Why is he in the Lakers jersey on the jacket over there?
A lot of people have taken me to answer that question. And my answer is the true one. I didn't choose it. My publisher. Yeah, but Philly people, thank you, Gracie. I'll end with one last Wilt story. There's so many. Or an anecdote. Wilt, as I said, sponsored a young girls track team with money and deeds. And on his LA funeral, the day of the LA funeral, I don't want to get emotional. A number of the girls, women, got up to drive from San Diego to LA. And that day, there was an earthquake in LA, 7.1 on the Richter scale. I end part of the book with that. True story. I verified the bloody earthquake was 7.1 that day. Thanks a million.
I have a quick question, because I feel like I'm the only one here not from Philadelphia.
Oh, no.
You're not, oh, well, no, yeah.
Yeah.
Way too much around here. So, my very first time going to a Sixers game, I was in such awe when I looked at the rafters, seeing all the retired members. I mean, that is just stunning for me to see in person.
I went the night he was honored.
Oh, good
Did
for
you?
you. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So-
It took him years to agree to do it.
So I just want to ask you guys where he is. We actually have the younger generation. Remember, we talked earlier about why his name doesn't stand out among the greats. Well, we have a younger generation here now. I'm pointing at you. I don't know your name. But you're going to represent your generation for a second here. In the grand scheme of things, like how do those guys, where is he?
I
As
think
far
he's- I say he's up there, man. He's that guy like Joel.
No, I grew up with Irving. I grew up with Barkley. I mean, those are, right, I mean, because that's my age group. So when I see the rafters, that's But as
Barkley ever grow up.
Barkley, no, come on, he's either you love him or you hate him. I love Charles Barkley. But when you see all the names up there, where does Wilt Chamberlain, as far as the grades go, 1, 2, 3? What, because we were talking about how earlier his name isn't as grand as some could be, and it should be. So what, do you have a general opinion on that?
I mean, I don't have a general opinion, I used to, these are beats up there, I like Joel Embiid
Yeah,
right now, but I didn't think Wilt Chamberlain's up there, of course.
And Joe Embiid is quoted on YouTube as being in awe of Wilt Chamberlain.
I agree.
You didn't have,
You
you
know,
didn't have the
let's-
media
let's-
exposure than you have today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, there was no media then, they don't even have film of him scoring his record breaking.
Right, or other, you're right.
Bill Campbell was a radio guy talking about that game,
Exactly.
so the
true, yeah.
media coverage was nothing compared.
And other athletes are in awe, players are in awe
In
of
awe
Wilt's
of Wilt.
abilities, his strength, his stamina, his accomplishments. Kevin Garnett, a young, relatively younger, in the Goliath, the documentary said, we, all of us, me, but we all stand on Wilt's broad shoulders. It was great, I'm glad he said it.
There's a story, and I'm not sure it's true, that Wilt went up against Boston one night playing against Russell, went up to dunk the ball, and Bill Russell had his hand over the ball, and Wilt just picked him up too. And he
Yeah,
just
there-
put it right up and dunked the ball with
There are
Russell.
many stories like that.
He was
I'll tell
overpowered.
you a great, it's on YouTube. I love the story. Larry Brown, the ex-coach of the Sixers. This is Wilt, is he retired? Do it on, look it up on YouTube. I'll do it. I'll tell the gist of it. They're playing a pickup game. Larry Brown's the coach at UCLA then. He's coached all over the place. There's a pickup game, Magic Johnson and some other pros on one side and Wilt's on the other. And Magic throws up one of his great hooks and Wilt blocks it. And Magic says, goaltending, we win the game. And Wilt says, no, I love it. Wilt, it wasn't goaltending. You didn't win the game. We're still playing the game. It's tied. And Wilt turns to Larry Brown and says, Coach, was it goaltending? And Larry Brown says, no, yeah, it was not goaltending, Magic. And then Big Magic says, no, it was goaltending. And Wilt finally says, okay, you guys win. Let's play another game. You're not going to score a basket. Larry Brown, not me. It's on YouTube. Wilt blocks every shot. They don't. Thank you, Big Dipper. Thank you, guys. Great. Yeah.